Hi, welcome to this week's edition of PHQ, questions from the personality hacker community. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And Addison, let's get right to our question today.
Hi, I would like to know the strengths, weaknesses, similarities, and differences of an ENFJ and an INFJ pairing since they are only one letter different. I believe this is what my husband and I are. Thanks, Amber.
Thanks, Amber, for the question. One of the exciting things about the typology system of Myers-Briggs is how deep you can go with it. Oftentimes people stay right at the level of the four-letter code, your dichotomy. Whether you're an ENFJ, INFJ, ENFP, INFP, ENTP, all these different codes, but really those are decoder rings. We talk about at Personality Hacker how that four-letter code is basically a decoder ring for the cognitive function set that your mind is using to learn information and to make decisions. And if you've gotten one of our starter kits, for example, you'll see your personality profile, and we break it down into what we've called the car model, where we take a 4-passenger car. We have a driver, a co-pilot, a 10-year-old in the backseat, a 3-year-old in the backseat, and we show you all the mental processes of your mind based on your Myers-Briggs code and the positions they are in the car. Well, an ENFJ and an INFJ are going to share all the same cognitive functions. They're going to learn information in the same way, and they're going to make decisions in the same way. But here's the difference. Those cognitive functions in the car are going to be in different configurations depending on if you're an introvert or an extrovert. So all NFJs will use a decision-making process called harmony, and all NFJs will use a learning process that we've nicknamed perspectives. It's just which position, which is the driver and which is the co-pilot, depending on your personality type. So we can unpack that a little bit more here, but that's basically how that works. And if you're listening along and you haven't gotten your starter kit yet, we'd encourage you to do that, to look at the cognitive functions and how they are in your car. There's a lot of free articles and resources as well on our website in order to see this illustrated and how this works for your personality.
Yeah, so an ENFJ leads with harmony. That's their driver process. The technical name is extroverted feeling. And their co-pilot, or the auxiliary process, is perspectives, or the technical name is introverted intuition. That means that they're going to have the same kind of intuitive style as an INFJ, but because it is a supplement to them, their first go-to is harmony or extroverted feeling for an ENFJ. And that means that they're going to be looking at social dynamics first and foremost. They're going to be looking at how things are emotionally impacting another person. They're going to have higher skill developed in that process as well. So they're going to have a little easier time, say, creating boundaries or understanding how relationships work. They're just going to have a higher degree of proficiency in understanding the extroverted feeling world, right? The harmony world of interpersonal dynamics. Because perspectives is a co-pilot for them, it's not an afterthought, but it's supplemental, meaning that you first look at the relationship, you first look at the dynamics, all the unspoken social contracts between these relationships, and then you go, I wonder what's going on behind the scenes. And then you supplement an understanding of these social dynamics with an ability to get inside other people's brains or other people's minds, or kind of look at their hidden motivations. For an INFJ, it goes the reverse. The first thing that they look at are people's hidden motivations. They're looking at pattern recognition because they lead with that introverted intuitive process of perspectives. That's their driver. So the first thing they're looking at is the pattern recognition of what's going on in people's minds. And then they supplement it with a co-pilot of extroverted feeling or harmony, meaning the second thing that they think about is, okay, so how does this play out in interpersonal dynamics? How does this play out in society? How does this play out with the emotional impact it has on other people? So same mental processes, but in reverse positions. And that definitely alters the name of the game. For an ENFJ, they end up being a lot more talented at, say, relationship coaching, specifically relationships. They're really good at understanding how people are interacting with each other and why they're interacting the way that they are. An INFJ, on the other hand, will have higher skill in coaching an individual, one person, how things are impacting them on an individual level. They're a lot more likely to get inside one person's mind at a time and then understand how that person's world is impacting them as an individual. So you've got slightly different proficiencies. You've got slightly different skill building, talent, etc.
When you're in a relationship, so you have someone in a relationship, an ENFJ and an INFJ in a relationship, The ENFJ, remember, they lead with that harmony process. That's a decision-making process. And so for an ENFJ, they're going to tend to be able to make decisions more quickly. They're going to be more decisive as a general rule, and particularly when it comes to like people things or relationship things. Whereas the INFJ, because they lead with a technically called perceiving process or learning process, that perspectives, they tend to take in more information and delay decisions a little bit longer. They're not as decisive because they enjoy the process. It puts them in flow to continually learn and input information. So if you're in a relationship, a romantic relationship, and one person's able to be decisive, the other person takes a little longer to make decisions, sometimes that can cause some tension. Sometimes that can be one of the things that is a tense moment where you're wanting to gather more information before you make a decision. This other person wants to make the decision and go for it. And they're not wanting to take any more information. They're ready to just decide at this point. So that's one conflict that may come up in a relationship between the two types. And also there's this notion that you're both missing pieces of because you share all of the mental processes, you have the same blind spots often. In other words, there's things you're not seeing because both of you have the same strengths and the same weaknesses often. In your car, how your personality is laid out. So oftentimes you might miss things for each other in a romantic relationship and they just aren't on either of your radar. And then you're doubling down on your strengths. So that can also be a challenge sometimes in relationship.
Talking about some of the things that might trip you up, sort of the backseat passengers, that 10-year-old or 3-year-old. An ENFJ, because they lead with their feeling process, is more likely they're going to have an easier time of ignoring their intuitive process if they choose to. And that means that they're going to be more in touch with their the sensing world. They're going to be a little bit more excited by sensory experiences. Their 10-year-old process is called sensation, and so they're probably going to be a person who likes to get up and go. They're going to be a person who loves like really indulgent sensory experiences. They're going to have more of a sense of fun and joie de vivre, honestly. Whereas an INFJ, because their feeling process is supplemental, they're going to have an easier time of ignoring that feeling process and going to a thinking place. And so they might be a little bit more digital. They might have an easier time of being cold-hearted if they choose to. They're going to be more attracted to technology than an ENFJ is going to be. So they're going to be a lot more sort of, they're going to be a little bit more, I guess the only word I can think of is digital in the way that they think. So an ENFJ is going to show up a little bit more in touch with their sensing side. They're going to have an easier time of being present in the world right here, right now. And an INFJ is going to have an easier time of going to a thinking space where they're a little bit more technically savvy, or they might have a little easier time of being creating a space for themselves that's a little bit more protective. They don't have to necessarily be feeling engaged all the time, whereas an ENFJ is going to have a very difficult time not doing that. And when an INFJ goes through the 3-year-old process, it's going to look a lot more like that indulgent sensory experience, but it's going to look even more childlike than a 10-year-old position. It's going to look like a 3-year-old position. So it's going to be massively sensory indulgent. Whereas when an ENFJ goes to the 3-year-old position, it's going to look very thinking and cold and digital, but in a 3-year-old way. So it might look very critical, or it might look hypercritical or very self-critical. So it just shows up these functions. They're all the same processes, but they're in different positions in the car, so they impact the individual differently. So as Joel mentioned, if you want to get like a true deep dive, if you're an ENFJ or an INFJ and you want to get a true deep dive in what it looks like, we do have a massive deep dive that is available in the premium content or the personality development starter kit. So we do recommend doing that if you really want to get a deep dive. But that's an overview of basically how these functions impact the two individuals, even though they're the same processes. Where they fit in the car model absolutely alters how these two types are going to show up.
Yeah, and one other article you might want to check out is if you type in the search field at personalityhacker.com, ambivert personality. It goes into some of this too, because basically we're talking about the difference between an introverted and extrovert NFJ. And so this has some of these same ideas and has a lot of diagrams and some charts and some illustration there that might help wrap your mind around some of this as well in the comparing and contrasting. Again, I mentioned personalityhacker.com. Come over there. You can ask a question to PHQ, Questions for the Community, and we can answer those live on the air here. We also have a Facebook community that's growing rapidly, facebook.com/personalityhacker or twitter.com/personalityhack. We'd love to have you be a part of those. And be sure to subscribe to this podcast channel. We're going to continually putting out more of these PHQs. We're going to be obviously having our main podcast come out as well, and we'd love to have you part of this conversation. We love that you're listening in right now, and we'd love to have you join us in the future. My name is Joel Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
We'll talk to you on the next PHQ, Questions from the Personality Hacker Community.